Okay, good. It is in fact afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Steve Smith. I'm from the Department of Electronics at the university, one of the departments that Philip mentioned earlier, that's been involved with applying technologies to museum and cultural applications. Now, I do realise I'm one of the few people between you and lunch, and so I will be quite brisk, but please do stop me or ask questions later if there's anything else I can add. So the first thing I want to dispel is the Department of Electronics isn't just about soldering irons, circuit layouts, burning your fingers and being very technical. In the department here at York, we have programs that combine electronic engineering with media technology, with music technology. We have media suites, we have music suites, we have recording studios. So we do a lot of creative content, but in a technical context. So as far as the applying of rich media technologies to cultural and museum contexts, our main aim is to deliver the right information to the right format to the right people. So the big problem that most museums have, and certainly more than what we'd call the legacy or established museums, is that they have artifacts that aren't easily translatable to different audiences at different ages, different interests, different needs, or from different countries. And applying rich media technologies offers flexibility, interaction, and smart learning. So I'm going to go straight into the first example. This is one of the projects we did some years ago now with National Railway Museum, and this is with one of their locomotives. I know this looks like a model, but this is actually a photograph of one of their locomotives, which they've had the side cut off, so you can see how a steam locomotive works. Now, one of the first things we have to think about is actually steam locomotives are very complicated bits of engineering, and really to understand how they work isn't very straightforward. Having said that, most people who are queuing up to get into the National Railway Museum, I think, would hope by the time they've left the museum, they'd have a good idea of how a steam locomotive works. So currently, or this is a few years ago, they have this locomotive in the museum with lots of numbers on it and some placards at the front explaining how each part of the locomotive works. And this is not straightforward to understand for anybody. I certainly found it quite challenging. So the approach here was to project video onto the actual locomotive itself, so that aids understanding of how the steam is generated, how that then generates traction in the wheels and so forth. So that sounds pretty straightforward, just projecting video, but the way in which we get the visitors to demand the video, they demand the explanations they require at right level, requires a fair bit of thought and implementation to actually deliver that in this type of environment. We've also done some work with the Castle Museum, fantastic museum if you haven't seen it. This is a typical sort of period room where you have, in this case, a very rare harpsichord in a Georgian context, and that's it. That's what you see. It's very nice, but very, very limited. We wanted to bring that harpsichord to life with somebody actually playing it. So we got one of our profs dressed up in period costume, played a similar harpsichord in the Department of Music, green screened him, and then he became Pepper's Ghost on the harpsichord itself. This is something, again, of using sort of straightforward but involved technologies to bring these conventional exhibits alive. Also there, in their costume gallery, we rigged up projectors so we would digitize visitors' faces. They'd go around with a calling card, which actually had a barcode on the back of it. They present the barcode at the exhibit, and hey presto, their face appears on one of the mannequins displaying the costume. And we also have technology to work out the sex and the age of the visitor, so we don't get embarrassing mistakes with obviously the wrong person's face on the costume. So this is all well and good, but one of the things this really brings me on to is how can you actually make use of this type of technology and make it available? So all of these projects have really been undertaken as university projects with final year students who get a lot out of working with the real world environment, but how can we tap into that? And I think Philip mentioned some of that earlier, how the university is intending to try and exploit this technology through a university centre. But also, I think this particular example of augmented reality is a particularly good case of how some of the software has been made available open source. So augmented reality is different from virtual reality, where you fully immerse yourself into a digital environment. This is where we augment the real world with digital content. And in this case, we have this concept of projecting onto a table or onto a floor some graphical image, and then we also monitor the interaction with that graphical content, digital content, with a camera. And this is, I don't know if this is going to work, we'll soon find out. I suspected this might not work, so if you bear with me a second, I'm going to see if I can There it is. Oh dear, sorry, so close. Okay. Right, I'll replay this. So this is really showing how this works, and what you're going to see when I replay it in a moment is an agent, a software agent, which is the projected digital content, and showing how you can then interact with this content in real time. So this is the agent, the blob going around. We can constrain its movement within drawn lines, and then we can actually carry it across with this piece of cardboard, which also has a bound on as well. So just one more time, this blob is an agent. It's got a life of its own. We can constrain it in the real physical world while this agent is in the computer's world. Is that okay? So that is the basic concept of it. So that software which enabled that activity to be undertaken is open source. It's called Open Illusionist, and so some PhD students and a member of staff, Prof. John Robinson, made this available, and it allows for rapid design of these types of systems. So the great thing is, you saw that blob going around. I'm going to show you two more examples now. There's one exhibit that we did at the Royal Museum in Edinburgh, which is called Robot Ships. And on the tabletop, instead of having a blob, we have an oil tanker going across. The child then slams the oil tanker, oil seeps out of the oil tanker, and all of these little robot ships come up and suck up all the oil and take them away again. Highly contrived application area, but one example of how it can be used. And in the Castle Museum here in York, we're also looking to engage with their modifications. They're having new snickelways, and that is to provide rats, flies, and fish. And so what we have here is scurrying rats on the floor, which people can then interact with. So the idea of these sort of theme museums is you walk around and think, yeah, lovely, Victorian Street, that's great. But in those days, it was actually quite dangerous to walk down the back streets. You might get bitten by a rat, you might get attacked by flies, and so you can interact with this digital content in a way in which it's easy to provide and a way in which there are no moving parts. Now, the first thing you're going to think of is how easy is it to write this type of software? Well, the open source libraries make this thing pretty straightforward. So all you really need is two things. One is the graphics that you want projected, and so instead of that blue blob, we've got rats scurrying around, or flies buzzing around, or fish. And the second thing is the behavior that you want these things to have. And so in a short amount of computer code, about that long, you can describe how they should react when they interact either with a human or if they interact with each other, and what sort of behavior they should have. And so this framework of all the hard work has been done. And you need to then just write your little scripts, bung in the graphics, and then you can have loads of rats going around, or fish, or flies, or whatever. And that's about all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.